Harassment is by definition repetitive, but Wikipedia states that if harassment itself is repeated long enough, it becomes bullying. So it can be argued that all workplace bullying is a form of harassment. But I define harassment a little bit differently as a technique distinct from all of the other workplace bullying techniques that I have identified. The etymology of the word harass teaches us that it comes originally from a German word used to call dogs to attack. And the word has historically been used in association with warfare or hunting, meaning to fatigue or exhaust by repeated attacks. So in the roots of the word alone, we can see both the means and the intent of harassment. In the workplace, I find harassment primarily takes the form of interrupting activities with questions. Workplace bullies have a habit of asking a question or a series of questions without being interested in the answers, without even listening to the answers, without being able to respond to the answers, and without sharing any information about themselves. The vapidity, inanity, and utter idiocy of the questions knows no limits. Workplace bullies may simply scan the room, point at or pick up an object, and ask you if it belongs to you when it clearly doesn't. The invasive, violating interruptions with questions can occur when the target is isolated and alone, engaged in some solitary activity, especially eating. When harassment occurs in a group setting, you know how it goes. The non-narcissists and non-bullies in the workplace are engaged in the flow of quiet, calm, relaxed chit-chat or small talk. The workplace bully blows in with all the subtlety of a tsunami, fires off questions that completely derail the conversation and shuts down the entire room. And because the bully cannot respond to the answers to the questions, everything comes to a screeching halt. If you're wondering what's up with this utterly bizarre behavior, I think there are multiple reasons ranging from fairly innocuous to outright sinister. The workplace bully's habit of abusive, aggressive questioning that feels like an interrogation and makes everyone feel uncomfortable may stem from a basic lack of social skills. If you observe the workplace bully, you'll notice before he begins questioning, there is a pause, and that pause is confusion. The workplace bully needs to ask questions because he really doesn't know the answers to those questions. If you are a non-bully and a non-narcissist, by now you have enough tools to be able to have a healthy conversation. You know you need to talk about yourself because it demonstrates that you have an open heart and an open mind and invites other people to talk about themselves as well. I share, you share, in a lateral exchange. I have a theory that most targets of workplace bullying are empaths, or at the very least, highly sensitive people. And because they are intuitive, they don't need to ask questions. You already know, but the narcissistic workplace bully doesn't. One of the reasons these disturbing invasions of questioning occur when the target is alone is just tribal. Human beings were historically socialized to collaborate in large-scale group efforts for which everyone was needed, so any isolated or solitary activity was seen as a threat to the whole, thereby establishing a now long-standing cultural legacy of abuse of introverts. I disagree that introverts are more likely to be bullied than extroverts. If you're like me and you are a target of workplace bullying, you may not necessarily be a natural introvert. In fact, you may be a natural extrovert, but have had introversion forced on you by decades of abuse and bullying which seek to isolate the target. By now, both introverts and extroverts know that there are many benefits to introversion, or at the very least, spending time alone, not the least of which is heightened creativity, which can lend itself to increased problem solving, which benefits the team. But when workplace bullies harass, they may be simply activating their Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal brains to force normalcy and socialization on the target by forcing you to engage and interact with them. By disrupting your solitude, the workplace bully may simply be poking the bear. It's like inserting a stick into an anthill or throwing a stone into the surface of the water to watch the ripple effect. The workplace bully just wants to see what happens. When the workplace bully knows that his line of questioning makes other people feel uncomfortable and continues to do it anyway, then his narcissism has progressed into full-blown sociopathology. The workplace bully enjoys hurting other people and enjoys their pain. He likes watching you squirm and wants to get a rise out of you. Here too, part of the intent is primordial. Because you are alone, you look like the wounded gazelle at the edge of the herd. Historically corrupt socialization equates isolation with weakness because it looks like you have no support system. All bullies are fundamentally weak, lazy cowards at heart who don't want a challenge or even hard work. So they target the prey that appears to be the easiest. Though some people may disagree with me, I argue that workplace bullying is a form of narcissistic abuse because the parallels between narcissistic personality disorder and workplace bullying will blow your mind. This form of harassment is narcissism at its finest. A narcissist is, by definition, a dead and empty soul with no real internal life or self. Instead, there is just the false self, the thin, superficial veneer of the narcissistic ego, which demands constant narcissistic supply, otherwise known as attention. The narcissist cannot go without attention any more than you can go without air to breathe. Without narcissistic supply, the narcissist feels as though he is literally dying because he has nothing but the narcissistic ego. Harassment is forced attention. Even though the target is the one being questioned, the abusive, violating, invasive, and aggressive interrogating puts all of the attention back on the bully. One of the reasons that harassment occurs so often when the target is alone or simply quiet is that the narcissistic workplace bully knows that you really don't want to engage or interact with him, and for good reason. He's a bully. If you are empathic or sensitive, you can read people's energy, and there is nothing interesting or attractive about a narcissistic workplace bully. But workplace bullies as narcissists are psychological rapists. They don't take no for an answer. I will not be ignored. How dare you ignore me and not feed me my narcissistic supply? Narcissists may conduct themselves with a lot of bravado and braggadocio, but the false self is nothing but a mask for catastrophic inner insecurity. Narcissists are wholly without confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, and self-love. In the mind of a narcissist, it's nothing but chaos, drama, turmoil, and conflict. If you are empathic, sensitive, and intuitive, you can literally feel that the harassment and the questioning arise out of anxiety. By blurting out the most idiotic question that comes to mind the minute the target makes an appearance, the workplace bully is self-medicating, trying to make himself feel better about the overwhelming anxiety and other negative emotions the bully feels in the presence of the target. The target is being used like a cigarette, a drink, or any other drug. In other languages, the root for the verb bully is the same as the root for the verb intimidate. The bully feels intimidated by the target and is trying to intimidate in return. The natural human response to feeling intimidated is to dominate. Again, you can literally feel the bully trying to wrest back control over a situation which he feels has gotten out of control, and that's because he is no longer the center of attention. In the warped, sick, twisted, dark, and ugly mind of a workplace bully, attention is a finite resource. If you're getting attention, then that means that he isn't, because workplace bullies don't do lateral sharing and they don't do collaborative teamwork. In other words, it's all about the bully. It's a control move. Narcissism is defined by many things, but one of those things is pathological jealousy. Research has shown that so often what people are really jealous of is not tangible things like money or possessions, but instead intangible qualities like confidence, optimism, or joy. I find it interesting that so often harassment occurs when the target is quiet and alone, engaged in some solitary activity, and even more interesting that so often that activity is eating. From the term anorexia nervosa, we can understand that anxiety or nervousness cuts appetite. In order to be able to eat, you have to be relaxed, in other words, calm. If you are eating alone, you are at peace with yourself. And narcissistic workplace bullies are jealous of your inner peace. You are a peaceful person because you have done the inner work. You have a self and you don't hate yourself. You've gone within, self-explored, self-examined, self-discovered, and arrived at a very high level of self-awareness and a thorough and complete knowledge of and definition of self. You have the ability to self-care, self-soothe, self-create, self-generate, and self-stimulate. Narcissistic workplace bullies are master disturbers of the peace. The harassment is an attempt to disrupt the calm, peace, tranquility, and serenity that you have arrived at because of the work that you have done on yourself. Because workplace bullies may not know one moment of peace until they are well into their 70s or ever at all in their lives. You try living your life like that. That's no way to live. So that's an introduction to the workplace bullying technique of harassment. To read more in detail, I've written an essay on workplace bullying. It's on my website. I include that information in the description. The reason I do these videos is to create a forum where targets of workplace bullying can share their experiences and their stories with one another in a kind of support group, so that you know, number one, you're not crazy. Workplace bullying is real and your feelings are perfectly valid and justified. And number two, you're not alone. Unfortunately, countless others have experienced the same thing. So I look forward to reading your comments and I promise to try to respond to each one. Take care.